been 20 no-hitters in White Sox history. The last one thrown by Chicago early in 2021, Carlos Rodon. 3 outs away from a no-hitter. To right center field, and a rise ends Cease's chance at history.
On September 3rd, 2022, White Sox pitcher Dylan Cease was 2 strikes away from a no-hitter. Unfortunately, he had to face the eventual American League batting title winner, Luis Arraez, and that's how it ended. Cease did end up finishing the complete game shutout, the first of his career. In fact, this was his first 9-inning start ever, and in his previous start on August 29th, he threw his first 8-inning start of his career. In the span of 2 starts, Cease pitched the first and only 8+ inning outings of his career. These outings were sandwiched in between a bunch of 5-inning and 6-inning outings, which is a much more common number of innings you'd see from Cease. However, here's something you might not see every day. During this 2-month span, Cease had the 6th highest walks per 9 rate among qualified pitchers. Between these 6 pitchers, Cease had the best ERA, WHIP, and opponent batting average. Applying these numbers on a league-wide basis, and you see that Cease was just different. He may give up a lot of walks, but he doesn't give up a lot of runs. So the question is, how? Well, it took a lot of work for Cease to become the unique pitcher he is today. After being traded to the White Sox as a top 100 prospect, he eventually made his big league debut in mid-2019. Fast forward a few years, and Cease is one of the best pitchers in baseball. But I don't know if anyone expected him to make history in such a unique way. Between May 29th and August 11th, Cease didn't allow more than 1 earned run per start for 14 straight outings, the longest streak of this nature in MLB history, surpassing Jacob deGrom's 12-game streak in 2021 and Hall of Famer Bob Gibson's 11-game streak back in 1968. During this streak, Cease ranked first in ERA, sitting over a full run higher than second-place Justin Verlander. Still, Verlander will very likely win the AL Cy Young Award over Cease, given he just pitched one of the best seasons of the 21st century. But there's something that's bugging me. How did Cease not rank first in WAR during this span? He literally had an ERA less than 1, but 5 other pitchers still ranked above him in WAR. What's going on here? Well, specifically we're looking at F-WAR, which uses FIP in their calculations, as opposed to B-WAR, which uses runs allowed per 9. FIP is similar to ERA, but its goal is to focus solely on the events a pitcher has the most control over: strikeouts, unintentional walks, hit by pitches, and home runs. Ideally, a pitcher who doesn't hit many batters, has a high strikeout rate, and low walk and home run rates will be considered as one of the league's best pitchers. Looking at the 5 pitchers with a higher F-WAR than Cease during his historic 14-game streak, apart from leading the group in strikeouts per 9, there's one glaring difference. Cease's walk rate was nearly 4 walks per 9 innings. Not only is this far and away the highest walk rate in this 6-person group, only one other pitcher in this span had a higher walk rate than Cease. Looking at the entire 2022 season, again, Cease is among the best in many stats, but that walk rate sticks out like a sore thumb. Going back to the Verlander and Cease debate, if Cease did somehow win the Cy Young, he'd be the first pitcher ever to win the award while having the highest walk rate in the league. So again, what's going on here? Well, the most accurate descriptor of Cease I can think of is that he's effectively wild. A pitcher who's effectively wild is someone who has great stuff but has trouble controlling their pitches. This is someone who causes lots of swing and misses, leading to a high strikeout rate, but also throws out of the zone pretty often, leading to a high walk rate. This isn't new for Cease, as it's something he's showcased throughout his pro career. The main difference is that this year, he's not allowing nearly as many earned runs. Throughout MLB history, on only 6 different occasions has a pitcher had a strikeout rate and walk rate on par with Cease. However, he has the best ERA and ERA plus among all these pitchers. Well, it's actually only 2 pitchers, Kerry Wood and Robbie Ray. The main difference between Wood and Cease is that Wood was an overall more wild pitcher, as seen with the higher walk rate and huge difference in hit batsmen. This leaves one other pitcher, Robbie Ray. While Ray was an all-star in 2017, he needed to noticeably decrease his walk rate while maintaining his elite strikeout rate, which is exactly what he did, leading the league in strikeouts as a result. However, Cease is going to finish top 3 in Cy Young voting despite his high walk rate. Although, there's actually something else these 3 pitchers have in common. low hit rates. Cease manages to walk so many batters, yet he still possesses the league's third best starter ERA, and it's because he ranks third in hits per 9. This is why his whip is only 1.11, which is slightly above average among qualified starters, but it's way above league average. This combination of hits per 9, walks per 9, and whip isn't that uncommon, as it's happened 5 times in the past 15 seasons. However, what isn't common is the ERA plus Cease produced, as it's something that hasn't been seen since Nolan Ryan, the king of the term effectively wild. Okay, so what else about Cease makes him effectively wild? Well, he actually altered his pitch breakdown quite a bit this season. He drastically increased the usage of his slider while decreasing his four-seam fastball usage. As a result, the combination of Cease's slider and curveball rates have led to a breaking ball usage rate of 56.8%, the highest among qualified starting pitchers. Considering his breaking ball's average of velocity and spin rate that's top 5 in the league, it makes sense why he relies on them so much. Let's look at his slider in particular. According to Baseball Savant's run value statistic, Cease's slider has been the league's most valuable pitch by a wide margin. Looking at every pitcher who's thrown a slider in at least 200 plate appearances, which basically disqualifies relief pitchers, Cease's slider is among the best in many key stats. Although, as a starting pitcher, Cease can't just throw the slider every pitch, no matter how effective it may be. You have to keep batters guessing. This is where the four-seam fastball comes in. While Cease's fastball has decreased in usage, it hasn't decreased in effectiveness. Like his slider, his fastball is top 5 in both average velocity and spin rate. The tunneling of Cease's fastball and slider illustrates how a batter's attempt to decipher these two pitches is a near impossible task. As for his other two pitches, run value doesn't rate them very highly, so it makes sense why the usage rate went down this year. In particular, his changeup is the type of pitch that isn't analytically good, according to White Sox pitching coach Ethan Katz, but rather it succeeds because of its 20 miles per hour of separation with the four-seamer. So overall, I wouldn't consider these pitches bad, they just aren't his main pitches. However, Cease didn't necessarily start the season like this. He started to use those secondary pitches a lot less in mid to late May, while drastically increasing his slider usage. But I don't know if this was always the plan. Take a look at this. After a seemingly abnormal first start where Cease's slider usage was over 45%, this usage rate slowly went down going into mid-May. But then, everything changed. On May 2nd, Cease believed he threw the best outing of his career. A 7-inning, 11-strikeout performance where Cease allowed only 1 hit. All I know is that if I struck out Mike Trout 4 times in a game, I'd consider it my best start too. The funny thing about this start is that Cease's slider usage rate was at a season low. However, it's not about what happened during this start, it's about what happened afterwards. For the rest of May, Cease's slider increased in velocity, spin rate, and eventually usage rate. What was going on here? Well, after an inconsistent month of May that started with Cease's self-proclaimed best start ever and eventually led to his worst start of the year on May 24th, he said he'd been working on his slider grip in order to gain more depth in his grip. Well, in his last start of the month, on the 29th, Cease began his historic streak of 14 games with 1 or less earned runs in each outing. It wasn't a perfect start considering the 4 walks he gave up, but he noted the great movement his slider had and how it made his fastball a bit trickier for hitters to size up. After this start, Cease's slider usage rate continued to increase, now with a spin rate that averaged over 2,800 RPM and a speed around 87 to 88 miles per hour. To be fair, Cease's slider has averaged a 2,800 RPM spin rate since 2020, but the 2 miles per hour increase in velocity was a big difference. So let's check out the visual differences in how this new, faster slider looked. Here's 3 random sliders with roughly similar spin rates from different time periods. Here's a slider from August 2021, and here's one from April 2022. Both are pretty similar pitches. Now here's one from September 2022. The difference is subtle, but to me, the slider from September doesn't loop in as much. It's a tighter curve into the strike zone. White Sox All-Star closer Liam Hendriks called it a 90 miles per hour curveball. The break, the movement, the spin, he could throw it middle and it'd still be effective because hitters need to be ready for his other pitches too. This new slider allowed Cease to make history. But this isn't the full story. It's about to get very weird. The 14-game, 1 earned run per start streak was incredible, but take a closer look at these stat lines, mainly the first 3 games. In this 3-game span, Cease allowed 14 walks, 9 hits, and 9 runs, but no earned runs. Let me say that again. A 3-game span where 9 runs scored, but Cease didn't allow a single earned run. This is the first time this has happened since 1968, and only the 5th time it's happened since 1913. What this means is that all of these runs were the result of errors at some point in the game. On May 29th, it was an error by third baseman Jake Berger. On June 4th, it was an error by first baseman Jose Abreu. And on June 9th, it was another error by Jake Berger. Now, it's pretty clear that the 2022 White Sox were not very good defensively, but the difference in runs and earned runs Cease allowed throughout the season wasn't much different than some of the league's other top starters. It's really funny just to see that all of these unearned runs were confined to such a short span of games. So, we've seen where 9 of these runs came from. What about the 10th? Well, funny enough, it happened in the start right after this 3-game span.
Pickoff attempt. Oh, no. It's off the glove of Mendick. That gives Reyes home, and the White Sox hurt themselves with the throwing error.
An error by Cease, but it was still classified as an unearned run. And if you add this game to the 3-game span that preceded it, Cease became the first player since 1913 to allow at least 10 runs in a 4-game span, but none of them were earned. Ultimately, I think the main takeaway to Cease's weird 2022 season is how much he's improved the quality of his pitches, mainly his slider. The White Sox's bad defense played a minor part in keeping Cease's ERA low. But the larger reason is that Cease's stuff has reached a point where, despite its flaws, it's an overall positive. He allows so few hits compared to other starters, and this surpasses the negatives of high walks and low efficient starts. Considering Cease led the league in 6-inning or less starts with more than 100 pitches thrown, that low efficiency is definitely something to keep in mind, especially if the White Sox want to keep him as the ace of the rotation. But with the low line drive and barrel rates Cease has had this season, he's still a top 2 starter in any rotation. I'm very intrigued to see what the future holds for Cease. Does he start allowing earned runs at a rate closer to his FIP? Or has he found a formula that hitters won't be able to crack? Given the weirdly historic nature of his 2022 season, it's tough to make a prediction. However, considering he's got arguably the best pitch in the league right now, I think overall, he'll be just fine. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you did, and subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks for watching.